All right, joining me now is Matt Whitaker, former acting attorney general. Matt, good to see you. I want to get your take on this. The fact that the FBI raided Mar-a-Lago, wouldn't coordinate with his attorneys, wouldn't let Trump's attorneys be there as they looked through his home. What do you make of that?
Well, a couple things, Sean, and it's good to be with you tonight. First of all, the DOJ policy is to do the least intrusive means to obtain evidence, and whether that is negotiating with lawyers, whether that is issuing a subpoena, in this case, doing a execution of a search warrant is a really extreme measure based on everything I know about this case. The second thing that I really believe is, the DOJ in this particular case, when you're going after the former president of the United States on what seems to be fairly specious grounds, I think bears a burden to have some transparency, and whether that's to have the lawyers of the president review what they're looking at, whether that is to have some other form of transparency and accountability, because the American people have seen too often, Sean, and we've talked about this, they've seen Hunter Biden skate free so far after 3+ years of investigation. They saw Hillary Clinton skate free, and they've seen so many others on the left seem to get away with it. So this looks like another example of a two-tiered system of justice.
It's completely a two-tiered system of justice. I was a state prosecutor for almost 10 years. You're a federal prosecutor, obviously ran the DOJ. Here's what I think is happening. They're executing a search warrant under the auspices of the National Archives, but when you have a warrant, you can do a massive sweep of documents. So this is really not about the archives. This is really about January 6th. They want to sweep up every document they can out of the Trump residence and try to build a case other than that which the National Archives case was given the search warrant.
Yeah, and the other thing that, does anybody believe that Donald Trump packed these boxes, moved these boxes, has been through these boxes, otherwise has any idea what the contents of these boxes are that are at Mar-a-Lago? I mean, this seems to me, if on its face it's about the Presidential Records Act and a possible, classified information being in, an unsecured location or having been moved from the White House, then I think, negotiation, if I had been the Attorney General at the time, I would have made sure that my people were doing everything possible to engage with the Trump team to negotiate a resolution to this. Every other president has been afforded that courtesy, and this just seems to be an extreme measure of executing a search warrant at Mar-a-Lago. It sends a clear message from the DOJ, that I'm sure not only Trump, but Trump supporters hear loud and clear, and that is they are going to prosecute people on the right to the highest extent possible.
Well, you know what? We've seen it before. I mean, Hillary Clinton had her own server where she had classified information on that server, people who had access to the server who weren't qualified to have sensitive information, like Uma Abedin, had that information on their cell phones. And what did they do to Hillary Clinton? They didn't raid her home. They didn't go to Chappaqua and raid her. They sat down with her attorneys and negotiated. This is far less serious, but they raid Donald Trump's residence. It seems like there's a double standard. And what concerns me is the fact that they wouldn't let Trump's attorneys participate with the FBI as they did the search.
Yeah, and really, typically, Sean, you wouldn't do that. But in a case like this where, there are questions of transparency and motivation, I think there is no reason the FBI couldn't have let a Trump attorney follow along and make sure that as they're going through Melania's closet, that, they're not doing anything inappropriate. I just don't know why the FBI is so afraid of transparency. It goes to the other issues of recording statements. Quite frankly, the FBI has hurt its own reputation and is now paying the price that they're not as respected as they once were because of these types of tactics that are unexplained and ultimately may prove to be pretty draconian.
Yeah, no, you're right. Justice used to be blind, and now it's political. But I want to get your take on this, too. So a Republican congressman from Pennsylvania saying the FBI confiscated his cell phone just a day after the Mar-a-Lago raid, telling Fox News, quote, "This morning while traveling with my family, 3 FBI agents visited me and seized my cell phone. They made no attempt to contact my lawyer, who would have made arrangements for them to have my phone, if that was their wish. I'm outraged, though not surprised, that the FBI, under the direction of Merrick Garland's DOJ, would seize the phone of a sitting member of Congress." So, Matt, I was a member of Congress. The fact that the executive branch would step in and seize the phone of a member of Congress concerns me, not because of what they might be looking for in the commission of a crime, which would, by the way, be their January 6th investigation, which I think is bogus, but the fact that this congressman is the head of the Freedom Caucus. So in the speech and debate clause of the Constitution, the executive branch isn't entitled to that information that's contained on the phone, that information in regard to legislation. But here they've seized it, and they have access to now all that information, which is obviously a constitutional violation.
Yeah, it is. And, the separation of powers, our founding fathers felt very strongly about this. And the idea of accommodation, where one branch had to accommodate the other, had to sit down, had to negotiate the resolution of these types of disagreements where there was a tension naturally built in the system. And when the FBI goes and takes Congressman Perry's phone and confiscates it, as, again, they are unentitled to not maybe everything on that phone, but a large portion of what's on that phone. I just think this is a huge violation of constitutional rights. And another example where they could have just called up the congressman's lawyers if they really had an interest on the contents of his phone. Do they really believe that Scott Perry's going to delete the contents of his phone if the FBI wants to see it? Do they really think he's not an American patriot that would be happily give them everything they're entitled to? That's what concerns me the most, is an assumption of guilt on the parts of sort of freedom-loving Americans by the FBI. There's just suspicion that shouldn't be there.
What concerns me is normally when this has happened in the past, both Republicans and Democrats would stand together in defense of any member of Congress when the executive branch would go after them. Now, if a crime was committed, the executive branch, the DOJ and the FBI had to work with the leadership of the Congress, the House counsel, to access the information, to execute a warrant. And in this case, it appears that didn't happen. And if it did happen, why isn't Speaker Pelosi speaking out, or the House counsel speaking out that, yeah, no, I had contact with the DOJ and the FBI, and I said, take his phone, take everything on it, as opposed to let's narrow the scope of what you want and get specifically in regard to, what crime you're investigating. You can't have all his legislative data off that phone.
No, you can't. I mean, I just think this is this week has been a very grave moment in American history. I think we're at an inflection point, and ultimately, Congress is going to have to get stronger and exert its authority over these executive agencies that have now become so big that they don't feel that the rules ultimately apply to them, and they're unwilling to be accountable and transparent like the American people are going to start demanding.
Matt Whitaker, you got to get rid of their unions. That's the way you diminish their power. That's my position. Matt Whitaker, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. Good insight.
Thank you, Sean. Good to see you. Have a good night.